Imagine this. Tomorrow morning you wake up and check your bank account. Not $10,000, not 10 million, $10 billion. You could buy a private island, your own airline, a fleet of super yachts, maybe even a professional sports team. But there's one business that's surprisingly difficult to buy: an oil refinery. And here's the crazy part. Even some of the richest companies in the world don't want to build one from scratch. Why? Because owning an oil refinery isn't just about making gasoline. It's about handling one of the most dangerous, expensive, and politically sensitive businesses on Earth. One wrong decision can cost billions of dollars. One accident can shut down an entire region. And one government policy can turn a profitable refinery into a financial nightmare overnight. So if you really wanted to buy an oil refinery, what would it actually take? Let's find out. Before you can own a refinery, you first need to understand one simple thing. Crude oil is almost useless. That might sound strange. After all, countries fight over it. Companies spend billions drilling for it. And it's often called black gold. But if you poured crude oil into your car, it wouldn't go anywhere. Crude oil isn't gasoline. It's a thick, dark mixture containing hundreds of different hydrocarbons. Think of it like a giant box filled with random Lego pieces. On their own, they're not very useful. But if you separate and assemble them correctly, you can create something valuable. That's exactly what an oil refinery does. It transforms one messy raw material into dozens of products people use every single day. Gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, lubricants, asphalt, even chemicals used to make plastics, medicines, cosmetics, and clothing. In fact, look around your room for a second. Your phone case, your keyboard, your headphones, the paint on your walls, your toothbrush. There's a good chance that oil played a role in making all of them. Most people think oil is only about fuel. It's much bigger than that. Modern life quietly depends on it. Now here's where things get interesting. If refining oil is so important, why doesn't every oil-producing country simply build more refineries? The answer is money. A lot of money. Building a modern refinery isn't like building a factory. It's more like building a small industrial city. Pipes stretch for miles. Towering steel columns reach into the sky. Thousands of valves constantly open and close. Massive storage tanks hold millions of gallons of fuel, and everything has to operate safely, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without stopping, ever. Even a medium-sized refinery can cost several $1 billion to build. The largest ones can cost well over $10 billion, depending on their complexity. And that's before producing a single drop of fuel. Imagine spending $10 billion, then waiting years before your business even opens. Most investors would run away immediately, but the cost of construction is only the beginning. Now you need land, not just any land. A refinery can't be built in the middle of a crowded city. It's simply too dangerous. Instead, companies look for huge areas near coastlines, ports, pipelines, or major transportation routes. Why? Because crude oil has to arrive somehow, and finished fuel has to leave just as efficiently. Every extra mile of transportation adds cost. Every delay reduces profits. Location can determine whether a refinery succeeds or fails. Then come the environmental rules. And this is where many projects hit a wall. Oil refineries release emissions that governments regulate very carefully. Companies must install advanced filtration systems, wastewater treatment facilities, fire protection systems, emergency shutdown equipment, air quality monitoring, hazardous waste management. The list seems endless. Each safety requirement protects people and the environment, but each one also adds millions, or even hundreds of millions of dollars to the final cost. Now imagine you're almost ready to build. You have the money, you have the land, you have the engineers. Surely construction can begin now, not quite. First, you need permission, lots of it. Building an oil refinery usually requires approval from multiple government agencies, environmental agencies, local governments, national regulators, fire safety departments, energy authorities, sometimes even neighboring communities. One rejected permit can delay a project for years. Some proposed refineries have spent over a decade waiting for approval. Others never get built at all. And every month of delay costs money, a lot of money, but let's say everything goes perfectly. Construction finally begins. What exactly are you building? From the outside, a refinery looks like a maze of pipes and giant metal towers. It almost resembles a futuristic city, but every section has a specific job. The journey begins with crude oil entering the refinery. The first stop is something called the distillation tower. Don't let the name scare you. The idea is actually simple. Imagine cooking a pot of soup. As it heats up, steam rises. Different liquids boil at different temperatures. A refinery uses the exact same principle. Crude oil is heated to extremely high temperatures. The lighter parts rise higher inside the tower. The heavier parts stay lower. This separates crude oil into different groups. Some become gasoline, others become diesel, jet fuel, lubricating oils, heavy fuel oil. It's like sorting hundreds of mixed candies into separate jars, except these jars are worth millions of dollars. But here's the twist. The first separation isn't enough. Many of those products still aren't useful. That's where some of the refinery's most expensive equipment comes into play. Machines with names like catalytic crackers and hydrocrackers. They sound complicated, but their job is surprisingly easy to understand. Think about breaking a large chocolate bar into smaller pieces. These machines do something similar. They break large, heavy hydrocarbon molecules into smaller ones that become more valuable fuels like gasoline and diesel. In other words, they literally increase the value of crude oil. And that's how refineries make much of their money. But here's something most people never think about. Refineries don't automatically make huge profits just because oil prices go up. In fact, sometimes expensive oil can actually make life harder for refinery owners. How is that possible? That's exactly where this business becomes far more complicated than most people imagine. Sometimes people assume an oil refinery makes money the same way a gold mine does. Buy something valuable, sell it for more. Simple, but that's not how this business works. A refinery doesn't make most of its money from the price of crude oil itself. It makes money from the difference between what it pays for crude oil and what it earns by selling products like gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and other chemicals. That difference is called the refining margin or the crack spread. Think of it like a bakery. A bakery buys flour, sugar, butter, and eggs. Those ingredients cost money. The bakery then turns them into cakes. If ingredient prices suddenly double, but customers refuse to pay more for cakes, the bakery earns less profit. Oil refineries face the exact same problem. If crude oil becomes extremely expensive while fuel prices stay relatively stable, refinery profits can shrink quickly. And sometimes the opposite happens. Oil prices fall. Demand for gasoline remains strong. Suddenly, refineries can make enormous profits. It's one of the reasons this business is so unpredictable. Now imagine you've spent $10 billion building your refinery. You finally start operating. Everything is running smoothly. Then, a hurricane hits. That isn't just bad luck. It's a billion-dollar problem. Many of the world's largest refineries are located along coastlines because giant oil tankers need easy access. But coastlines also face hurricanes, floods, and powerful storms. When a refinery shuts down unexpectedly, thousands of workers can be affected. Fuel production slows, gas stations may experience shortages, and gasoline prices can rise almost overnight. In fact, one major refinery shutting down can sometimes affect fuel prices hundreds of miles away. That's how important these facilities are. But weather isn't the only threat. Fire is every refinery owner's nightmare. Remember, you're dealing with enormous amounts of highly flammable liquids and gases. Temperatures can reach hundreds of degrees. Pressures are incredibly high. If even one major system fails, the consequences can be devastating. That's why modern refineries have layers upon layers of safety systems. Emergency shutdown buttons, automatic fire suppression, pressure relief valves, gas detection sensors, thousands of cameras, highly trained emergency response teams. It might seem excessive until you realize what's at stake. One serious accident doesn't just damage equipment. It can injure workers, halt production for months, trigger lawsuits, and destroy a company's reputation. Safety isn't optional. It's one of the biggest investments a refinery ever makes. Now here's something even more surprising. Owning a refinery doesn't mean you own the oil. Many people think companies like Shell, ExxonMobil, or BP simply pump oil out of the ground and refine it themselves. Sometimes they do, but not always. A refinery often buys crude oil from completely different companies. Some oil comes from Saudi Arabia, some from the United States, some from Canada, some from Brazil, some from Iraq. Every type of crude oil is different. Some are light. Some are heavy, some contain more sulfur. Others are much cleaner. You can think of crude oil like different grades of coffee beans. Each one has its own characteristics. And here's the challenge. Not every refinery can process every type of crude oil. Some are specifically designed for light crude. Others specialize in heavy crude. Changing that design later can cost billions. So refinery owners must carefully decide which kinds of oil they'll buy years before construction even begins. One wrong decision can reduce profits for decades. Now imagine something completely outside your control happens. A war breaks out. Suddenly oil exports from a major producing country stop, or a shipping route closes, or governments impose sanctions. Within hours, global oil markets react, prices jump, supply chains change, shipping costs increase. Refineries must quickly find new suppliers, and that's much harder than it sounds, because oil isn't delivered like ordering a package online. Massive tankers may spend weeks crossing oceans. Pipelines stretch across entire countries. One disruption can ripple through the entire global economy. This is why governments pay so much attention to oil refineries. They're not just businesses. They're part of a country's energy security. During emergencies, having enough fuel can be just as important as having enough food. Without gasoline, ambulances stop, police vehicles stop, fire trucks stop, supply trucks stop. Even airports struggle to operate. A modern economy depends on fuel every single day. That's why many governments consider refineries to be critical national infrastructure. They're protected more carefully than most ordinary factories. Now here's a question. If refineries are so important, why don't countries simply build dozens of new ones? The answer might surprise you. Because the world isn't sure how long they'll remain profitable. Think about what's happening today. Electric vehicles are becoming more common. Solar power is expanding. Wind energy continues to grow. Countries are investing billions in cleaner technologies. Many governments have announced plans to reduce carbon emissions over the coming decades. That creates uncertainty. Imagine spending $15 billion on a refinery expected to operate for 50 years, while wondering whether fuel demand might begin falling halfway through its life. That's an incredibly risky investment. And investors hate uncertainty. It's one of the biggest reasons why relatively few large refineries have been built in recent years, especially in developed countries. Instead, many companies choose to upgrade existing refineries rather than build brand new ones. It's usually faster, cheaper, and far less risky. But don't assume oil is disappearing anytime soon. Even if every new car sold tomorrow were electric, oil would still play a massive role in modern life. Remember all those products we talked about earlier? Plastics, medical equipment, fertilizers, cosmetics, industrial chemicals, packaging materials. Airplanes still rely heavily on jet fuel. Cargo ships transport goods around the world. Heavy construction equipment depends on diesel. The world uses oil in far more ways than simply filling up cars, which means refineries will likely remain important for many years to come, but that doesn't make them easy businesses. In fact, the hardest part is still ahead. The hardest part isn't building the refinery. It isn't buying the land. It isn't even spending $10 billion. The hardest part is keeping the refinery profitable for the next 30 to 50 years. Think about that for a second. When a company decides to build a refinery, it's not making a decision for next year. It's making a decision for the next generation. Executives have to predict something almost impossible. What will the world look like decades from now? Will oil demand increase? Will electric vehicles dominate? Will governments introduce stricter environmental laws? Will another country discover massive new oil reserves? No one knows for sure, yet billions of dollars depend on getting those predictions right. That's why refinery owners spend huge amounts of money studying future trends before they spend a single dollar on construction. Now here's something that surprises a lot of people. The companies that own refineries don't actually want dramatic oil price swings. Most people assume high oil prices make oil companies happy. Not necessarily. Refineries prefer something much more valuable: stability. If prices change too fast, planning becomes incredibly difficult. Imagine running a restaurant where the price of every ingredient doubles overnight. How do you set your menu prices? How much food should you order? Can your customers afford the increase? A refinery faces similar challenges, just on a much larger scale. This is why many companies use complex financial tools to reduce risk. Some lock in future prices. Others sign long-term supply contracts. Large companies often spread their operations across multiple countries so they aren't dependent on just one region. It's all about reducing uncertainty, because uncertainty is expensive. And speaking of expensive, let's talk about the people who actually run these giant facilities. An oil refinery isn't operated by a handful of workers. It takes thousands of highly trained professionals, chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, pipeline specialists, safety inspectors, control room operators, maintenance crews, environmental experts, security teams, logistics managers, laboratory technicians. Every single day, these people monitor thousands of sensors, valves, pumps, and pipelines. Modern refineries are so advanced that many control rooms look more like NASA mission control than a factory. Huge digital screens display temperatures, pressures, flow rates, and safety alerts in real time. Operators constantly watch for the smallest abnormal reading, because catching a problem early can prevent a disaster later. And here's something fascinating. Many refineries never completely shut down. They operate 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, even on holidays, even during the night. Why? Because stopping and restarting a refinery isn't like turning your car off and on. It can take days, or even weeks. It costs millions of dollars. That's why refineries schedule major maintenance years in advance. These planned shutdowns are called turnarounds. During a turnaround, thousands of extra workers arrive to inspect equipment, replace worn-out parts, clean pipelines, and upgrade systems. It can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But skipping maintenance would be even more expensive. Now imagine you've finally mastered all of this. You have the money, the permits, the workers, the technology, the supply chains, the safety systems, the customers. Congratulations, you officially own one of the most complicated businesses on Earth. But there's still one final challenge: public opinion. Around the world, more people are asking an important question. How do we produce the energy we need while protecting the environment? Some argue oil will remain essential for decades. Others believe the future belongs to renewable energy. Regardless of where you stand, one thing is clear. The energy industry is changing. Many refinery companies are already adapting. Some are investing in renewable fuels. Others are producing sustainable aviation fuel for airlines. Some are exploring hydrogen. Others are building facilities capable of processing biofuels alongside traditional crude oil. In other words, even oil refineries are evolving. The companies that refuse to adapt may struggle in the future. The ones that innovate have a better chance of surviving. And that's probably the biggest lesson from this entire story. Buying an oil refinery isn't really about buying a factory. It's about buying responsibility for billions of dollars, for thousands of employees, for critical infrastructure, for environmental protection, for energy security, and for making decisions that could affect millions of people. That's a lot of pressure. Could a billionaire buy an oil refinery? Technically, yes, if they had enough money, the right team, government approvals, years of patience, and were willing to accept enormous financial risk. But here's the twist. Having the money is actually the easy part. Building the expertise, managing the risks, navigating regulations, securing reliable crude supplies, protecting workers, and staying profitable for decades. That's what separates successful refinery owners from everyone else. So the next time you pull into a gas station and fill up your car, remember this. That fuel didn't just appear there by accident. It traveled through one of the most complex industrial systems ever built, from an oil field to a tanker or pipeline, through a refinery filled with thousands of machines, into storage terminals, onto fuel trucks, and finally, into your vehicle. It's a journey involving billions of dollars, thousands of workers, cutting-edge engineering, and years of planning. Also, you can fill your tank in just a few minutes. And that's what makes oil refineries so fascinating. They're not just giant factories. They're some of the most important and most misunderstood machines keeping the modern world running. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more videos explaining how the world's biggest industries, technologies, and businesses actually work, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.